and really to the state of Louisiana, it was really challenging. At first, I was very confused. I didn't really understand why I was having a hard time launching business that I had run successfully in Georgia for many years. Um, they're both southern states, very similar profiles. But, I had been in Georgia most of my life, and I was very familiar with Georgia. So just kind of, I guess I knew how things worked. But coming here, I was, had a lot of confusion. And I went to look at some statistics, really for another reason, for another project, and came across something that really surprised me. And the thing is that when you see the numbers, it really is eye-opening. One of the statistics, and this is from a few years ago. I'm going to try to check while I'm talking and to see how up to date this is. But I was just really surprised to see that only a very small percentage of sales are spent with minority small businesses in the state of Louisiana. And that was deeply troubling to me, because when you go into small business, you have a goal not only to, support yourself, and your family, but you're really supporting your community and your local economy. And so if we have a lot of businesses existing that are not being successful, it's really a drain on the economy. And so when we think about it from the bigger picture, it's very important to support local businesses, right? So that we can support the local economy. Everybody wins. So when you see that not happening, it just raises a lot of concerns. When you hear something like that, what does that make you think about? Or is it a surprise to you when I said that? Does it seem like something you kind of had a feeling of already? What do you think?
Well, for me,
go ahead.
I've always realized, that's because probably of my age, that Black people had a hard time in business. Even in some instances, Black people would treat the Black business owner differently. They wouldn't pay their bill necessarily on time, or they wouldn't pay it at all, simply for the fact that they figured that Black business owner didn't need to be paid, or they wouldn't pay him first, they would pay him last over all of the other debts. That's what I've noticed. I'm not sure if it's still like that for Black business owners or not, but the problem just didn't come from other races. It came from our race not willing to treat the Black business owner the same way that they treated other business owners.
Thank you for sharing your experience. What was there someone else that was wanting to jump in? Jay, was that you or Jamie?
I was just saying I see a distinct disparity as far as people going to or not going to smaller minority-owned businesses versus bigger companies. It's so common. It's so common in the market that it does kind of it pulls down on the market in the whole. Like one of the things that I've been trying to look into is like different ways we can persuade people to start leaning more towards your local small minority business owners, your community business owners. So that's one of the things I think that at this point, with it being a conversation, I think at this point we should start looking at how we can start changing that dynamic.
Right, right, right. So we can finally acknowledge out loud, hey, this is happening. And so we can finally get to a place of what can we do about it? Let's start doing that, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
This is the opportune time to do it. Everybody's talking about how things need to change and how minorities need to be given a better chance at pretty much everything at this point. So while the conversation's going, we should look at just those different avenues we can take to increase the profitability of the minority businesses, especially ones in our community.
Right, right. Let's see. Suzanne, thanks for joining us. Just chime in anytime. We've got a small group here. If you'd like to join in, Suzanne, someone I actually just met on LinkedIn, who's got strong interest in more sustainable business practices. And Suzanne, if you're here with us, I was just curious.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for popping in.
Sure.
Yeah, I was just curious about what your thoughts are on all of this. How do you think that social justice, diversity, inclusion, supporting minority businesses, how does that fit into a sustainable business model?
Well, I honestly think that, so many things are changing right now. And, my background is I moved to Austin after living in Buffalo for a number of years. Most of my life I lived in the Buffalo, New York area. And I recently moved to Austin, Texas. And so I really just think that what I see is more and more of the young people are more socially conscious in a lot of ways. And I think that with their awareness, they're paying more attention to brands and companies and what their values are. And they're bringing that to the forefront. So I think that just being a part of the community, putting yourself out there and showing your social consciousness and awareness as a brand, and also being sensitive to the issues of economic justice as well as sustainability as far as the environment and things like that. I think all of those things are more top of mind for the younger generation moving forward. So I think that's going to help any business that is moving forward now, getting set up and just putting that out there as part of your story of who you are. I think that's going to resonate more so with the generation that's coming up, which I think is great.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thanks. So, I think that we kind of see throughout history where it's really the younger people who are really get I guess sort of really take ownership of these movements and the principles, the ideals, and so I think it's a great idea to sort of turn really to that generation for support too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, what are some other ideas of tapping into support for local minority businesses? What can the smaller minority business owners do for themselves, really to take advantage of the sudden, massive interest in the cause? What do you guys think?
I'm always a big fan of connecting with a lot of the organizations that are out there that focus on business development.
Mhm.
Right now, with everybody looking at diversity and inclusion, is a good time to get your name out there, especially if you're a small minority business. You want to get your
Mhm.
name out there in the middle of the conversation, and to connect your business to that conversation, to say that you are a business that can benefit from that type of change in the environment,
Mhm.
in the whole market. Uh, One thing I do notice about a lot of the small business owners is that they're not as eager to connect with a lot of the organizations like your urban leagues, your scores, your fund 17s. And it's not that they're not really eager. They're not aware of what how they can help them build their business. So it's while everybody's talking about diversity and inclusion, it's time to start reaching out to these organizations and say, "Hey, I'm in business. How can you help me? What kind of
Mhm.
advice can you give me? What tools can you give me? What resources can you give me? What opportunities are out there?" There's one of the chambers of commerce, New Orleans Black Chamber of Commerce. They send out a lot of information on things like RFPs, requests for proposals. Those opportunities for business owners to get in on these set aside contracts that can be very lucrative for their business. I've met business owners that's taking advantage of those programs, and they do very well for themselves because they get out there and connect with these organizations that have the information to get them in the door.
That's a really great point, Jay. So it's um, it's not that the help and the support isn't there, it's that people aren't tapping into it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so in a sense, yes, that's basically what I'm saying, and I'm not saying it in a way as though saying that they don't necessarily want to. They're not they're not fully aware of what the possibilities as far as what he can get out of the programs. So that is going to take some education to go around about what the programs do and how the programs help to get them to be a little bit more active in connecting, but also they still have to have that drive to go down those avenues. That's another thing I see in some business owners. They're apprehensive as far as creating written business plans or written marketing plans that in the long run can help them. It's just not what they're used to doing as far as business is concerned.
Yeah, I definitely see that a lot. There's a big resistance to documentation, and really even planning to an extent, which I wonder if you guys have any thoughts around that. Like, I think that large organizations have resources to hire people specifically for those jobs, you know, to hire grant writers, to hire proposal writers, to hire planners, to hire technical writers to document what the planners came up with. You know, just, you know, it's very specialized, and they have the resources to hire, you know, people even full time to do those jobs. You know, whereas in a smaller business, you've got a handful of people, sometimes one or two people, you know, and, you know, either in a brand new small business or a family owned business, you know, small family business, micro businesses, they're really wearing all the hats themselves. And, you know, from a management perspective, I just kind of wonder, in terms of trying to figure out how to support smaller local businesses, do we need to provide education so that they can do these types of things themselves, you know, add another hat for them to wear, put more responsibilities on their plates, or maybe figure out a way to organize services to do these types of things on their behalf? and is, considering that there are organizations doing these things already, what is available, So I do know that there's a lot of education available, but are there really services to help kind of take some of the weight and pressure and task off of small business owners' to-do lists?
Well, I think some of the small businesses today have the premise that if I build it, my customers will come. And those thoughts come from the past, because not only do they need to seek the help you're talking about, but somehow or another, they need to figure out how to advertise. I think advertisement is one avenue that many people forget about. Whether they're seeking advertising through some of the social media, or if they're doing others, newspaper, radio, I don't know, but that's an avenue most or many small businesses that have run into trouble. That's something they're not doing, is advertising. And then the other thing that they may not be doing is being involved in the community, because you can hide away in your business and sit there 20 hours, but you're not going out into the community and being socially conscious of the things that's needed in that community. So I think that's two problem areas, along with what Jay mentioned earlier.
Those are great points, Mrs. White. And so from your perspective, Mrs. White, do you see this as an issue for, say, like your generation of small business owners? Do you see it continuing to persist with, people in younger generations? Is it a resistance to advertising, a resistance to spending the money? Is it a resistance in terms of, I just don't have time and I don't know how to hire someone? Just like, what do you see happening when you see this type of resistance come up? Like, what are the causes of it?
I think that many people who start a small business started on a wish and a prayer, and the money that's needed is just not there, meaning they're not planning and doing their research so that they can be successful. I think a lot of people is like, I got a business idea and I'm going to do this. And maybe they just have the money to initiate the business, but the research that's involved in it, and having, even taking out a small business loan. A lot of people don't like taking out loans, or maybe they're not qualified. I'm not quite sure, but they don't do that. And so then they're constantly, short on money. I think that's the problem. And, if you don't plan and have a budget, then you're not going to have advertisement, because all of that free advertisement, word of mouth, sometimes it works depending on what it is. But as we see businesses faltering, then, and you analyze what they did, then I think that's a huge part of it, is that they just initially didn't even have the right amount of money to start. Now, of course, I'm not talking about right now during this pandemic, but during normal times, I think that's what the problem is, starting out with not the right amount of money.
What are some other thoughts? Thanks a lot, Mrs. White. Those are great insights. What are some other thoughts about why small business owners struggle? Why they don't do more advertising, why they don't take advantage of digital advertising, those sorts of things. What have you seen either in your own small business or with your small business clients or friends, people that you know?
Now, one thing I do want to mention, and actually Sherry, Ms. Nelson actually put something in the comments regarding it. She has a company, VES LLC, that provides like business services for businesses. Now, the reason why I want to point that out is because that's one thing that a lot of small businesses need to start looking into, outsourcing some of the administrative work when it comes to business. And the reason I say that, when you outsource that type of work, you're able to manage the business a little bit better and actually accomplish more. Now, you'll outsource that work rather than actually hire employees, because that's one way to save some money basically, as far as getting that work done. So instead of hiring an actual administrative assistant for $30,000-$40,000 a year, you'll outsource to a company that offers you those services at a lower cost. Plus, you won't have the cost of insurance and different things like that when it comes to employees. You'll just have to pay another company. So it gives you some flexibility as far as what kind of cost you'll incur to get the help that you need. Also, that's another avenue for other small business owners, consultants, and everything like that to help you to build their own businesses. I know a couple of consultants now. I've mentored a couple of them, and that was one of the things that we talked about, is how to build their business to other small business owners, especially minority business owners. And we took the route of what I talked about earlier, connecting with a lot of the organizations that focus on business development. A lot of those organizations look for people in the community to help educate the community, so they can get your name out front of a lot of potential clients. They can connect you with a lot of opportunities. It just takes a different form from what most people are used to as far as setting up their business. And I see another comment says, a business plan will save you money in the long run, which it will. A business plan will help you determine what works and what doesn't work for your business, and it helps you find a way to manage your business to where it makes it easier for you to scale your business up and have a very profitable experience.
I'd like to piggyback off of that too. I think that a lot of small business owners, from my experience, they're just, they're going from one thing to another. They're running the business, and it's very consuming. But they need to be, helped along a little bit with the awareness, like you said, that business plan is going to help them in the long run. Because not only do they need to have a plan for managing their money, but they also need to take some time out every now and then and just really reflect on what's going on in the marketplace around them, because things are constantly changing and they need to dedicate that time. And so I think sometimes people are intimidated by writing and by putting everything out there, and they feel like they're locked into it once they write it out. And they need to be educated, I think, on the fact that it's a living document and it's supposed to change with them and their business as their business changes. So I think it's just helping them to be less intimidated by the writing of it and the process, and understanding that it's a guide. It's not something that's written in stone, if that makes sense.
Hi, this is Barbara Holloway from SCORE.
Hi, Dr. Holloway. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
Hey,
I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. It's one of the reasons why we developed a condensed business plan. It's pretty small, maybe a couple of pages, and with some guides on the information that's there to help reduce some of that intimidation. And the other one is, I just thought about that listening to you all. There's a webinar that I refer to my clients a lot, and it's really good. It's about 35, 40 minutes, and it shares the importance of being aware that you're juggling many duties and you can't as one person. And then it has another good piece in there about the positivity of outsourcing. And it gives some good suggestions about, the economics of it, and then finding those organizations that, and there are out there that are not that expensive, so that a person can really manage that cost, that additional cost, into whatever their budget is. But those are two excellent points. Trying to do too many things with one person, and definitely not having a plan.
Right, exactly. Now, there's two words I want to talk about a little bit. One is profitability, and the other one is cost. I feel like, and I don't know if anybody else sees and hears this, but it's almost like those are dirty words. You start talking about profits, and I think that for large organizations, that's a great word. Like, they know what that means. And, I think that sometimes it's associated with some negative corporate behaviors, like fraud and scandal and abuse and taking advantage of people and horrible bosses. And it's all about the money. It's profit, profit, profit. But at the same time, and I was just having this conversation earlier today, profit is just another word, in my opinion, for sustainability, right? Like, without a surplus of funds above the cost, the business cannot continue. And then at the same time, when there is not a profit, the cost can seem insurmountable. And, I think maybe that's why some people want to avoid costs at all costs. They want to avoid spending any money on their business. So I don't know. It's sort of an interesting juxtaposition. What do you all think?
Oh, I think it's part of. I think the negative connotation with cost and profit is part of a bigger issue. And the reason I say that, it's all about finance. A lot of small business owners, a lot of people in the community don't like talking about their income, their bills, their financial situation. And it's I think it's something that we're all taught growing up. I know when I started working, that was one of the things that they encouraged us not to do, is not to talk about our income, our pay scale with our co-workers and things like that. So when you come out of those environments, you have this idea of you have to be so secretive about that information that it makes it hard for you to make that transition to an actual business owner who has to talk about that. That's something that's a normal part of business that's necessary for you to talk about. If you can't discuss your finances and your financial management plan, it's going to be very hard, almost impossible for you to actually be as successful as you can be.
Right. Any other thoughts about that? About our thought processes around profits and costs? Let's see. Jamie, are you there with us? See, this is what happens when people are quiet. I have to start calling on people.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for picking on me.
So, Jamie, what are your thoughts about just the concepts, the ideas of profit and costs when you're, really trying to start and grow a small business?
Honestly, I think a big issue for a lot of small business owners is they're small business owners, but they're not business people. And there's a huge difference. And that's where I think a lot of the problems and issues come with when it comes to small businesses, is that they go into a business but don't have the entrepreneurial mindset, the mindset of it's going to cost money to make money. Kind of like Mrs. White was saying earlier too, maybe they don't have a lot of money, so it's a lot of fear factor for them. And just the mindset of, okay, I'm going to develop this plan, I'm going to execute this plan. You know, they have contingency plans. For some people, and you know, being transparent, speaking for myself, it's very intimidating to try to formalize a plan, stick to it, and put that fear aside and just go get it.
Thanks for sharing that and for your honesty. Jamie, I'm just curious from your perspective, when you talk about the fear factor, do you think that could be a reason why some small businesses don't reach out for help? Is it that they are so, I don't know, paralyzed, you know, by the thought of it, that even taking a positive action is a challenge?
Exactly. I do feel that a lot of times it's just overwhelming for a lot of people, again, because they don't have that true business mindset of, okay, I'm going to delegate this to this person, I'm going to delegate that to that person, or as Jay was mentioning earlier, a company that will kind of encompass everything and do a lot of the administrative type of work for you, so that you can focus on whatever it is your business entails. And so it can be sort of paralyzing to give up control with the mindset that I'm actually going to gain control by giving up control. So, so I think that paradox for a lot of people is very difficult, because your business is your baby for a lot of small business owners. And, you're risking losing it maybe by not going out there and investing and going to social functions and whatnot, and advertising and spending money on administrative help. But, a lot of people are going into small businesses and they weren't necessarily overly successful before, so they don't have, again, that business mindset that maybe a seasoned business person would have, or just one with maybe a more natural innate sense of business. And again, you can learn those things, but still, for a lot of people, that risk factor it's very difficult and overwhelming.
Thanks again for sharing with us. Those are really great insights. You made an important analogy that I really like, which is that your business is your baby, or really a metaphor, right? Your business is your baby. And as we like to say, at least in African-American community, it takes a village to raise a child. And I like to think of the same thing about a business. It takes a team, it takes a whole lot of people to build a successful business, to make it sustainable. It takes people. And if it's just you, like others were saying, you're just juggling too many things. You're going to drop the ball. It's inevitable. Not to be negative or fatalistic, and like, if you can manage to juggle all the balls and you can sustain that, that's amazing. But unless you went into business to be a juggler, it's not that practical, right? So just like, like, I'm not a mom yet, but I I do a lot of work with children and with parents, and that's how I got started in business, was in teaching and tutoring, and I see that a lot with especially new parents. They're very nervous about letting their child go to school, or like leaving their child for 20 or 30 minutes to do an activity. And, eventually when they see how well their child does, how well their baby does in the care of other, people who really care, that they can trust, they, relax a little bit. So I'm just wondering, when we look at it that way, can we take that same idea back to business, that if your business is your baby, you want to, send your baby to the babysitter sometime, or maybe even have a ongoing relationship with the babysitter for your business, right? So, a person or a company that you've outsourced to, just to help you with those parenting responsibilities of business. Does that make sense? Or, Jamie, what do you think about that? Or Jay?
I'll say, to kind of piggyback off of what y'all saying, it really is like raising a child. And you think about it this way: once a child gets 4 years old, now you're looking at sending him and her to preschool and kindergarten and first grade. So just like your child has to be taught by different instructors on specific levels, same way with your business. You bring those people from the outside to help develop your business in different areas. And that's how you turn a small startup to a large corporation.
Right, I totally agree. So you've got another message in the chat. Okay, she says, COVID-19 has made everybody pivot. So in essence, we all have a clean slate transitioning from employee to business owner, or revising how you are currently doing business. That's a really great point, which is that as challenging as this time is, there's a lot of hope that we can find in it, because anytime there's a problem, there's an opportunity, right? We have all of this uncertainty, but when I hear uncertainty, I think opportunity. For me personally, coming from my background in R&D, I think, it's just like we dwell right there in uncertainty, figuring out what can we measure, what's not possible to be measured yet, and, just sort of really navigating challenges. It's very different from the world of working in an established company as a staff person, as a technician, as a clinician, where your only job is to show up and do your one job, to wear your one hat every day. And so now you're faced with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of challenges, but you also have the opportunity to either start over or just to transition, to pivot, to take advantage of whatever opportunity is there for you.
No, I want to kind of change things a little bit, because April, you've been asking us a lot of questions.
Okay.
I'd like to get your take on it.
Sure.
So this is a great point. COVID-19 has caused everybody to pivot. So just in general, what type of opportunities do you see as far as our current situation? Just to give everybody an example of what you mean by pivoting and the things that have changed due to COVID-19.
Okay, sure. And actually, I'm going to share examples that have come from you guys, from the first town hall that we started back at the very beginning of this in March. Right in the thick of it, people were coming on and saying, well, our company is doing this. We've shifted and done this. We've pivoted and done this. And really the idea is, you have to ask yourself, how can I stay relevant if you're like literally a solopreneur and it's you doing everything? Or how can my company stay relevant right now? And just as a few examples that I think are pretty practical, if you were a company that made things, you physically made things, well, you needed to start making something that was needed and necessary and relevant. And the most obvious thing, of course, was masks. You know, the company may have been making something totally different before, but the technology may have been the same, or, you know, or maybe they just needed to get some new supplies. Apparently, it's not that difficult to make masks. And if you were a professional maker of things, you could make a really great product. And so that's one way that some companies have pivoted. Another example coming from my music background that I really like is Yamaha. I'm just gonna ask really quickly, when you think of the brand Yamaha, what do you think of? You might think of one or two things.
I think of musical instruments like keyboards, electric keyboards.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Okay, so Yamaha, excuse me, makes pianos, acoustic pianos. But you know, that's not always a hot item on the market. And so, you know, making keyboards and things like that that are more consumer friendly help them to stay relevant. But here's another thing. Yamaha at one point started making, and I'm sorry, I just totally lost this, but making something totally unrelated. I forget what it was. It was like belts or desk. So it was something like that. They had to pivot at some point, I think maybe in the 40s or something like that, around the Depression or the 20s, I don't know. But they had to pivot, and they couldn't make pianos for a good while. It just wasn't cost effective for them. And so they were making, I'm just gonna say desk for the purpose of this example, you know, which when you think about it, if you're making pianos, it's not that difficult to make a desk. They're both made of wood, right? And then, you know, they're not doing this, but a lot of newer instrument makers are re-envisioning what a piano can be and what it can be used for. One that I really liked when Riverwalk was sort of transitioning, a lot of the local little shop owners in there had to close. One of them had two pianos. They weren't like an instrument seller. They sold lots of, you know, souvenirs and touristy type things. But the owner was a musician, and she had two pianos in there. And they were really interesting to me. They were painted in fun colors like pink and yellow. And I thought, wow, this would be really great for kids. And she said, well, I'm going to sell one, but I really want to keep the other one. They were both painted in really fun colors. But the one she wanted to keep had like some extra parts on it, and it functioned as a desk. She wasn't using it as a piano, she was using it as a desk. But, you know, so she got to have a functional workspace while enjoying the idea of, you know, her piano. The one that was actually a piano is the one that she sold to me. So those are a couple of examples of physical products. On the other hand, when we're talking about services, in my opinion, services are even more feasible for pivoting, because it's just a matter of you personally doing something else, or the people in your company or your program just doing something a little bit differently. Sometimes you can do the same thing and just talk about it differently. For example, as I mentioned, I started out in teaching and tutoring, primarily in music. Like that's what was, I'm gonna use that P word, it was profitable for me. I was doing a lot, you know, teaching writing and math and statistics, but what worked out for me was music. And here in New Orleans, and in the state of Louisiana, every year I go to a music teacher conference. We talk about, you know, lots of music stuff, you know, what songs we're going to teach, that kind of thing. But we also talk about business and what we, you know, can be doing to keep music alive, you know, to keep convincing people to spend money on music lessons. And one thing that I talked to the teachers about a couple of years ago was starting to offer online lessons, you know, sharing e-learning with their students. And this was a real challenge because a lot of people were thinking, how can you teach piano on the internet? And I'm thinking, have you been on YouTube? You know, people are teaching piano on the internet, you know, since YouTube started. What are you talking about? But for traditional classical piano teachers, the idea is extremely, it's kind of mind-boggling, you know, because we do a lot of technique, we do a lot of physical and movement work, you know, around your, you know, like the body and your posture and your hand position and your fingers. And a lot of times, you know, we want to reach out and physically touch the person to help them, to guide them on where their fingers need to go, where their arms and elbows and shoulders need to go and how they need to move. And that's something that I won't say it's impossible to do virtually, but it's difficult and certainly different to do in person versus virtually. At the same time, what I talk to them about is, what are some things that you do in a lesson away from the piano? What are some things that you send home for homework? And can those be things that you teach, you know, online? What are some games that you play? You know, obviously if it's a board game and you physically need the board, you can't do that game, but probably there's another game you can play, right? And we see the same type of thing with, say, gym owners and trainers. They, you know, well, gyms have reopened, but at the time they were closed for roughly 3 months. You know, fitness folks had to figure out something to keep their membership alive, to stay engaged with their customers for that long period. I mean, like, that's a full quarter. That's long enough for people to forget you, right? You know, just, you know, a fun fact, we forget 90% of information within, like, I don't know, 10 minutes. It's something like that. It's kind of crazy. So, you know, you think about 3 months, that's a good long time for people to lose interest unless they're really loyal to you. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier during the pandemic, which is those relationships that you have to build from day one, you know, really connecting with your people. You know, if your business is your baby, your customers are your baby's friends or your baby's, I don't know, tutorers, and I don't know, but, you know, it's like, it's just, you know, you don't want your baby to grow up alone, right? And so if you're out for 3 months doing service A, what could you do? Either you can offer service A virtually, or you can offer service B, right? So for fitness folks, that was things like, you know, helping people to figure out how to work out in their living rooms. You know, if they were offering a physical fitness class on site at the gym, it's kind of hard to recreate that in someone's living room. But there were physical fitness activities that they could do, that they could demonstrate online and, you know, help the, you know, to facilitate with the person. So those are just a few examples. I want to stop and give space for other folks to chime in. But I hope that kind of clarifies the idea of pivoting and how it's really just sort of a smooth transition, really. And you know, honestly, as small business owners grow and they grow in the mindset of growth, you really can start to realize that, hey, if we offer both on-site and virtual activities, you know, that's, you know, possibly double the money. You know, it may not work out 50-50. It might even work out that you make more, you know. So anyway, that's my take. What do other folks think?
I do want to say one thing about the whole fitness trainers. I do like what they did. I saw a lot of them start doing videos on YouTube, and it looked like they pulled like remember back in like the 80s and 90s, you used to see these workout tapes where you can do things at home with exercises. It looked like they pulled from that era and said, okay, we're gonna update it and put it on YouTube, and that's how we stay connected with our clients, which I think is great. That if they had that mindset of we're pulling from something old and making it new again, I think that's always great, because there's things that people have used in the past that have worked wonderfully, and if we just revamp them for the modern era, I think they work great as well.
That's a great point, Jay. And you know, going back to music, we see that all the time with sampling, right? Like the 80s, you know, rap, it was sampling from the 70s, you know, or like even before that. And really artists are continuing to do that today. Like that's what DJing is all about. You know, it's like mixing the old with the new and making, you know, something great. And so we certainly can do that with anything, you know, like it's kind of like your mind is really what your only limit is. Yeah. Suzanne, what do you think?
Well, I'm actually having to pivot myself. I was recently working with GoDaddy as a social media, actually, it was selling social media services for them. But now this has been a great opportunity for me to completely re-envision. So I think a key here is to really move out of the logical linear mind and move into that liminal imaginary space, where that's where you can create some kind of magic around what's happening by kind of like figuring out, well, okay, so I have to kind of reposition myself. Well, how do I do that? Well, I think the first and foremost, most important aspect is finding that sense of purpose. So what is there about this moment where I can be of service? And like for me, that's where I've been doing a lot of networking on LinkedIn, and that's how we met. And I'm also reconnecting with, I'm like really weaving together a number of threads from my past experience. I'm finding how, because I've been involved in various community organizations, doing community work, activism in Buffalo with a group called Push Buffalo. But here in Austin, I haven't really plugged in so much. And now what I'm finding is I had just moved to Austin from one of the suburbs so that I could get more plugged in, and then we have COVID. So I'm finding that I can do this online. So it's really, I think it's a lot of times we have to push ourselves into this other space, and a lot of it I think helps with connecting with other people too.
Absolutely, Suzanne, thanks for sharing your personal story, and how you've been thinking about pivoting for yourself. And I love how you said that a lot, or really, you know, probably for you, all the things that you wanted to do in person, you're finding ways to do those same things online. And sure, it's different, but it's not impossible. It's not limiting. So yeah, well, that's great. Anybody else? How have you pivoted in your business with everything that's going on, or are you still struggling with the idea of pivoting, or you know, need ideas or suggestions for how you might stay relevant during this time?
One of the things the Jim Reed Museum is doing is we're doing more things digitally, because of course, you know, with COVID, museums and so forth were closed. I'm in Georgia. And now that we can actually go in to buildings, we have decided that we would remain closed because we don't really feel that it's safe. So how do we keep people's interest in the museum? Well, we've done a series of forums that we're continuing to do. And then we're just trying to increase awareness online. And that's our strategy to during this time period to keep people's interests alive in the museum.
That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that you're feeling positive about moving things online. I'm sure that was nerve-wracking or scary to think of, closing a museum.
It's very scary, and of course, we do our big fundraising during the late spring, early summertime, and so we've not been able to do any of those things. And we also do community outreach during the same time period. So all of that stuff has more or less been eliminated for us. And so it still is a little scary, but we are trying to think a little outside the box and work it like that until we feel that it's safe, to open the museum again.
Sounds good. I certainly wish you all the best, and I encourage you to stretch yourself because the things that you're talking about, I think, are a lot similar to what Suzanne was talking about, that she was wanting to do with getting out there in the community, and she's finding ways to do that online. And so I think, especially with social media, I think that if you allow yourself to explore that, that you may find that it's not that the activities necessarily have to be eliminated, but they just have to be implemented a little bit differently. And we've got some comments coming in. Let's see. A contingency plan should be part of a business plan. Otherwise, in crisis, the owner will have to mitigate the risk or eliminate it. Prevent measures. So preventive measures are more effective and cost saving. Right. So there again, going back to the idea of planning ahead of time is going to really save you in the long run versus backtracking. And certainly we can see that, playing out in our daily lives in a variety of ways. And of course, hindsight is always 20/20, but that goes back to bringing in those outside supports to help you with things that you may not be aware of, so that you can plan accordingly, so that you can be aware of what risk may be ahead of you that you may not have thought about because of your, it's just not what you do every day. But it is what some people do every day, and they can certainly share their expertise and resources to save you time and money in the long run.
Now, just kind of putting my 2 cents on there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things to keep in mind in the current era, a lot of companies are using technology now to run their business. A part of what a lot of these tech companies do is to help you structure your internal network and also plan ahead for different occurrences, especially in our area when it comes to things like hurricanes. They'll help you put a plan in place for that business interruption due to different things like hurricanes. I won't say that they can plan for things like the pandemic that we face, but just to have somebody that's part of their job, that's part of what they do on your team to go to when you're planning your business and when you're responding to different situations, that makes a big difference as far as how you how you become sustainable as a business. And again, that's another service that you can get that you can outsource to people. So rather than hiring a IT administrator, you would go to what they call a managed service provider, which does the same thing. It's just it's more cost effective. And to give you an example, if you have 5 to 10 computers, you're paying maybe $100 per computer from an MSP versus hiring an IT administrator for $60,000, $70,000 a year. So that's a big cost difference.
Absolutely. Certainly, it's better to give the right job to the right person or the right people. That just kind of going back to the hats and the juggling, and then also I think that there's this like huge wave of DIY, and it's certainly been very empowering. The thought of, hey, I can build my own website. Hey, I can be the CTO in my company. But certainly it's going to take a lot less time and certainly cost a lot less money if a person or team who already knows what they're doing can just start from day one doing the right thing versus sort of learning as they go along. And yes, okay, excellent. VES LLC offers project management services and other administrative services. So, great, like just, being here today, we've not only had a lot of great information, but, also just right away, you don't have to leave here and Google things, you've got somebody saying, hey, I'm here to help. All right, so we're coming up on the last part of our session here, and I want to kind of swing back around to our opening thoughts around diversity and inclusion and sustainability. All of these different things play into sustainability. Just basic management, operations, outsourcing to the right people. Building strong relationships with your customers, keeping up those relationships virtually when you can't, see them in person. Now, let's talk a little bit about how diversity fits into that within a small business. So we talked about how how sort of shopping disparities affect small businesses, but as small businesses grow and they begin to expand beyond DIY and doing everything myself, and they want to outsource to another small business or to an agency, or they want to hire a freelancer, how should they be thinking about diversity when they begin outsourcing services to other people and companies? What are your thoughts around that? Because just one thing that I think about is we don't want to recreate the same problems that we're fighting against, right? So we're concerned about large corporations that don't hire diverse staff, that don't help them to feel included when they do hire them. And a small business is not usually an issue because we're not hiring anybody. But when we do hire people, we want to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves even unconsciously, right?
Yeah, excuse me, I agree with that. One of the things that I think of when it comes to diversity and inclusion is opportunity, because business, a, a strong base of business is the relationships that you have. If I'm a small business owner and I hire a diverse group of people and build relationships with them from a sales standpoint, and I'm a salesman by trade, so I think about these things. From a sales standpoint, I've just tapped into their community. So I've just expanded my reach by diversifying the people that I've built into the company. So uh, if I have a tech from one part of Louisiana, if I have a salesperson from a different section of Louisiana, and I bring them together as part of my team and we build relationships with each other, we'll start cross communicating and different opportunities pop up, we can bring in our various resources. Um, but yeah, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, it creates a opportunity for expansion, um, because each culture has a different way of doing things. And if I decide I want to grow to the point where I take advantage of one of the programs to sell overseas, I want to have a diverse team, because I'll have a higher chance of being able to connect with those overseas clients because of the diversity in a business. And I'm just going from a small business to thinking to a global scale. So to me, it really depends on how you want to grow your business out.
Yeah, great point. And so you really can make a business case for diversity and inclusion in the sense of when customers, see people that look like them or people that speak their same language, they're going to be more likely to, well, even aside from any, prejudices or biases, it's just sort of a practical thing. If you want to reach an Asian market, you might want to, have people that, speak those languages, especially if you don't. And also, especially if you need to be doing something else in your business, right? Or a Spanish speaking community, language is a huge barrier. If you don't have bilingual, services or, people in your team, that's an entire population segment that you just don't get to tap into for your sales, or even for just ideas. you know
And to add on
mhm.
top of the language barrier, and this is information that anybody can get. So before I say the information, the SBA does have a program that helps small business owners become international business business businesses through trade, because they actually have a trade program for small business owners to help them get into that market. But one of the things I learned from talking to that department is that it's not just a language barrier, it's also customs. And what I mean by that is, you may go into a business situation, you may go into a meeting with a group of people and approach it in what you consider a normal manner. You go straight to business, trying to just get in, get out, and go on to the next one. Well, in some cultures, that's that's not a sign of good business. They don't do business in that manner. So when you go in and just go straight to your talking points, you kind of lose them in the beginning. So I say that to say is, if you have a diverse group of people and you have somebody on your team that understands that culture, they'll understand how to approach that business meeting. So some meetings will start out more casual, as far as they'll want to talk about personal things to create those connections, and then they'll get into business. And like I said before, if you have somebody that understands that culture due to their diverse background, you have a better chance of creating a big relationship, or actually reaching your goal in that whole process, because you have that knowledge.
Right. And if they're on your team already, you don't have to Google it. You don't have to try to hire somebody really quick right before the meeting. it's already there, and you've been able to plan for it. Yeah, all great points. And then the thing that I want to just, add on to that is that we're, using an example of expanding overseas, but, because our country is so diverse, our cities and states are so diverse, we have those same opportunities right here at home, right? Like, we have people who speak all different languages. We have, different, cultures represented. And, by only doing by only doing business with people just like us, in whatever way that is, we're just really limiting opportunity, like Jay was saying, and so, getting back to those concerns with money, it's kind of hard to go after new monies when you're not building relationships with new potential customers. And that again ties back into wearing too many hats. You got to have people who can help you with those things, and certainly by diversifying the backgrounds of those people, you create more opportunities to expand beyond your own personal reach. Let's see, Ms. Nelson says, cohesiveness as a team is key. And that's certainly true. One of the challenges of building a diverse team is that you still have to somehow get everybody on the same page. And I think that I'm not sure how other people feel about this, or like what have been your experiences, but I think that even just the idea of diversity is challenging for some people, because, if someone's opinion is different than yours, or if someone's way of communicating is different, I don't know, if their way of going about daily business is different, it can be a challenge, but certainly we have experts who can help facilitate, planning and communication. It's just there again. Anytime you run into a challenge or difficulty in your business, there's probably someone who can help. There's probably an organization or an agency that's established that can, from day one, solve that problem for you, and just so that you can carry on with the business. What do other folks think? What have been your observations, either in your own business or in past work experiences, where you've seen attempts to increase diversity? Did they go well? Did they go not so well? What are some best practices that you want to try to implement in your own business? And really, what are some mistakes that you've seen that you want to try to avoid?
I'll jump in here. I just think that what's really important with all of this is, as far as like reaching out and expanding your network, is to really be open to feedback and make sure that you're listening, and not only just listening, but soliciting feedback from as you expand your network from these other communities. So solicit the feedback, ask questions, and really be open to hearing and listening and working with that information. Because I think what happens a lot of times is we get ideas and we want to just go run with them and implement them, and we don't stop and reflect and listen and get that feedback. So I think feedback is a really important part of the process.
Absolutely, for sure. What are some other thoughts? I'm gonna call on people again. Jamie, what are your thoughts around diversity and inclusion as it applies to small business owners?
Let me jump in before Jamie speaks.
Okay.
I think that
Is
a lot of small businesses may hire family first because they're small and they're trying to work around certain financial obligations and expectations. So they hire within. The problem with that is that when I walk into the business, I'm going to look around to see who's working there. And depending on what I see, I may choose not to go there again because it is not diverse. I may not necessarily, as a customer, think, oh, this is a small business, I need to support them. I may think something entirely different because I don't see diversity. I don't hear diversity. And so I know I'm not the only person who thinks like that. A lot of people will walk into that business, and depending on what they see, they may never ever return to it. And they may also, you know, have some ugly thoughts about it, when in reality, all it was is just a reflection of that business being very small.
I see. So you're saying that it's not necessarily that a company is biased or racist or prejudiced. It's just that it's their personal family. And if their personal family isn't a rainbow, then it's just not going to look like a rainbow. But it's not something that should scare anybody off. But so there's sort of a disconnect there.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought this up. It goes back to one of the first comments that Suzanne made, which is that companies have to tap into their brand voice and their purpose and share that and communicate it with people, right? So if you're a small business, if you're a family business, and everybody looks the same, and everybody sounds the same and talks the same and walks the same, you've really got to make an extra effort to say to your potential customers, hey, we look like this and sound like this because we're a family, and I think, and not so much that I think, but, it's well established, family businesses have family as a core strength. Everybody can relate to that. Everybody comes into the world with a family, and we, may have differences, with our personal families, but that idea of family is something that people can relate to. And so if your business is small and you lack, certain characteristics of diversity because you're small or because it's your family, that's not necessarily a weakness. You just have to, going back to advertising, you have to communicate and advertise that your core strength is that you're a family, and how your family values may relate to some things that your customers would appreciate.
Exactly.
That's a
Let's
great
see.
point.
Yeah, thanks. Jamie, I think you were trying to jump back in. Did you get your Zoom straightened out?
Excuse me, yes, I'm here. Obviously, diversity is idealistic. It's unfortunately, it is a very touchy subject, and that's for a whole other topic. Is getting past certain barriers and understanding each other. But definitely, as been mentioned, I think people tend to go with familiarity, be it family or for whatever reasons, just what they're familiar with in businesses, which it may not always be right, because as you were saying earlier, if you're in a large Spanish speaking area and you don't have someone that could converse with them, then you will be losing, chances are, a lot of business. And also, as mentioned, some people do look for diversity, that they could identify with a person that you have working there. So it's definitely something to keep in mind for smaller businesses that have multiple, would have more than one, several employees.
Right. And, Jamie, I do want to make the one caveat, going back to what we were talking about earlier, which is they don't necessarily have to be employees, right? Like these, it can be reflected in the people that you add to your team in any way, in the companies that you outsource to, the freelancers, those people can be where you reach out, for that language diversity or social diversity and whatnot. Even before you begin to start hiring full-time people. Real quick, I'm going to share something from Chad, and then we'll start wrapping it up. Ms. Nelson says, expansion is not necessarily more employees, but more territories. That's not only very relevant, but it's very poetic, right? Very nice. And that's just so true. Again, not necessarily about your employees, but the markets and territories that you can reach with whatever kind of team you build. Let's see, and she says, when she first got started in her business, she invested $800 in a World Trade Center International Trade Certificate course because she wanted to understand diversity for future expansion. Really quick, do you mind telling us a little bit more about that course and what you learned from it?
Yes, I will. Primarily, it was maybe 3 or 4 day course that kind of touched on the trade agreements and how we think as America, and as Americans, everyone does business the way we do it, but there are different rules and policies that you have to make certain that you adhere to when you're dealing with other countries. So you cannot go in with the mindset that I'm going to function like I typically do in my business, in my local or my state or my area. You have to make certain that you've done your due diligence to know how those other teams, I'm sorry, not teams, those other countries operate. And you have to make certain that you have everything in order in America first before you can even attempt to go outside of the country.
Absolutely. And then before we go, tell us a little bit again about your company and what services you're offering.
My company is Virtuous Executive Services. I've been in business for 10 years. I started it as a result of being laid off from, Dry Savings Bank, which was then bought out by First NBC. So I took 32 years of administrative experience and capitalized on developing a company for myself. I also acquired a master's degree that identifies with project management. So along with the education and the experience, I've been able to sustain myself for the past 10 years. And I really focus on small businesses because I realize that they don't have the capital and the capacity to do the things like big corporations. So I focus more on as needed basis. So when I do consults with them, we work out a plan as to what their needs are at that time. And when they need me again, they come and see me again. And we do it on a retainer basis. So that's how I function.
That sounds great. Thanks so much for being here today and sharing your insights and services with us. Sounds like a great resource, and I'm going to certainly encourage people to take advantage.
I appreciate that. Thank you all for listening, and excuse all of my errors with having to retype.
Oh, no problem at all. So we're right at 7:30. Thanks again so much for everybody for joining in today. It's been wonderful. I I love having a smaller group where we can really connect and have these conversations around touchy subjects. Jay, do you have any closing words for us?
I have a few things to point out. But first, I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening for our virtual town hall. Some great information was shared, and I love this program because it gives us the opportunity to have these open discussions, especially on touchy subjects like this, diversity and inclusion, because these conversations need to happen. So I'm glad that everybody participated and gave us some great information. A few things I want to point out. We kind of developing our program a little bit more. Our next virtual town hall will be August 6th, because we do the virtual town hall once a month, the first Thursday of every month. So August 6th will be our next one. The topic will be sent out a little bit later. And we also launched our small business virtual town hall webpage off the SCORE website. So you'll get to access some of the recordings that we have from previous town halls, look at upcoming sessions. There are other community resources, which some of them are pictured on the side if you have the screen up, like the SBA, SBDC, Fund 17, and True Fund. Those organizations were the ones that help us start this virtual town hall. So we do have a link there that connects you directly to their specific organizations, as well as other organizations in the area that can help you develop your business. We also have the new SCORE Community Resilience Hub. That's another product of the COVID-19 pivot. We did pivot everything online, so we have online mentoring, but we do have a resilience hub with some educational resources on how to be resilient during these uncertain times. So when you get a chance, you can go to neworleans.score.org/SBVTH, and you'll get all those resources. If you have any questions, you can reach out directly to me, and I'll connect you with anybody that can help, or I can give you the answer to those questions. You can reach me at jeremy.reed@scorevolunteer.org. I'm the local chapter chair, so I do a lot of the connecting, as well as Dr. Holloway was on the call, and she is the office administrator. That's one of the hats that she wears. But we are here to help. We're a national organization of over 10,000 mentors that, with all of us being online, we have set up some great things for people, including virtual mentoring sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays. These are nationwide sessions, and you can see it on the SCORE website. So these are people not just in the local community, but some of our resource partners, like I believe Deluxe is part of those sessions. Intuit with QuickBooks is part of those sessions. A lot of these guys are reaching out and connecting with our local communities to help them learn about the resources and just give them basic information that they can use to develop businesses. So make sure you reach out to us, and if you have any questions, and reach out to all our community partners as well. Other than that, that's all I have for today. April, any last words?
That's it for me. Thanks so much again, everybody. Be sure to check out those resources. Have a good night.